Hi, Cal. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure, John. I've been looking forward to this for a lot of reasons.
Same
Uh,
here. Same here.
yes, yes,
And I,
yes,
and I
yes.
was on your show at one time, so now we're in the opposite seats.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I like this seat
Yeah.
actually better, to be on this end than on that end. But yeah, I've been looking forward to this. Thank you, John.
Okay, sure. We're going to talk about your latest book, but before we do that, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of backstory, if you don't mind.
Okay, real fast. I went to Rutgers College of Pharmacy in the 60s. So I was trained as a pharmacist. I was pushed into it by my overbearing mother. It was something I didn't want to do. It was science. I hated science. I liked history. So I graduated. I did pharmacy for 12 years, unhappily. And then I get these epiphanies all the time. And one morning I woke up and the epiphany was I gotta stop doing this. I had a brief career in acting, which lasted 9 seconds as I read for a part in a play and didn't get it. It was Frankenstein. And then as a young guy in the early, it was 1980. I said to my wife, I can't do this anymore, and I sat home, and then I got into eyewear sales of all things, and I wound up working for a company called Luxottica, and the largest eyewear company in the world. They lens crafters and Pearl and Ray-Ban and Armani and all these wonderful things. And I spent 25 years there working for the second richest Italian in the world, who taught me so much about life, about selling, about support and leadership. I was a regional sales manager, and I spent 25 years there. And near the end of my time there, another epiphany one day came, and watching Casablanca, and I wrote my first novel, which was called Vichy Water. And that was a vehicle for me to change my whole life, to reinvent myself. So I got into journalism 12 years ago. I became a journalist. Then I had a cable TV talk show here in Jersey. We bring in national type guests. I got involved in Rutgers University as a teacher, lecturer, and the podcasting, and then all of that, all that stuff swirling around in my head. It was time to write my second novel, and here I am.
And I see it here. It's called "There's a Tortoise in My Hair: A Journey to Spirit." Now, yeah, there it is. Now, I learned from having been a guest on your show that you're a fairly spiritual fellow, and it's really beautiful, some of the thoughts you have. You want to talk about that book or some of your spiritual journeys?
Sure. I was just a regular guy here in New Jersey and my whole life, and I did my own thing, and things begin to happen. So when this popped into my head, I didn't know about spirituality. I didn't know about any of these things. I was just a regular guy. Got some college football games, basketball games. So when this popped into my head 17, 18 years ago, I began to feel that somebody up there put this into my head, because I was not trained in English and as a writer. I had no writing background. I wrote a couple of papers here and there, but so it began my journey that there's somebody, there's something in my life, there's an entity, there's something beyond my comprehension. But I knew for sure that somebody up there put this in bed. It sounds kind of crazy. And then about a year after this was written, and it's Vichy Water. It's based on the movie Casablanca, and it's based on the end of the movie when Claude Rains picks up a bottle of Vichy Water in the movie. You see the label, and looks at it and throws it in the garbage, because anything in 1942 with the word Vichy in it kind of meant you were conspiring with the Germans. He throws it in the garbage, And then this novel appeared in my head, and about a year after this was published, there was a whole series of events in my life, so strange, but it's all documented, that are beyond. And my wife and I would continue to look at each other, these things happening, these coincidences are beyond coincidence. And I'm just a regular guy. I mean, football, basketball, I'm a regular guy. And now I'll show you. The day I found out it was my grandfather, who, for whatever reasons, I never knew him. He died in 1937, came from Russia. He planted this into my head, and this became such a vehicle for me to change my life, because I wrote a novel. And so, and that's how I got into journalism, and everything I'm doing now, being here with you, that's all, it was all because of this. I did nothing with this. I just threw it up there, but it was a vehicle. But a few years after this was published, I found this, when I realized it was my grandfather. Strange that it was my these are such fascinating spiritual stories. It was my grandfather who put this into my head. It was a vehicle of change. I found the one picture of my grandfather from 1902 in Newark, New Jersey. That's my grandfather, and there's that bottle of Vichy Water on that table. So that is strange. That
is unusual. That must have
very,
really
very,
sent you for a loop.
It's sent me for a loop, the goosebumps. And then, and we, my observation, we are like antennas. And and every one of us has this ability, this sense. And if we take the antenna and we kind of roll it up and put it out into the universe to receive, then we receive. And the more you want to receive, the more you get. So the things that have happened to me are wonderful, and they're such a gift, the spiritual stuff. And it's all explained in here, because the title is The Tortoise in My Hair. Part of the title is A Journey to Spirit. I wanted to tell, under the guise of fiction, creating a character, but I wanted to tell these wonderful stories of my spiritual involvement. A lot of them involve numbers 444 and 111, which in some places are tied into Catholic teachings. It's a sign of angelic intervention. And I've had this gift of angelic intervention. It's a gift, and I've observed and noticed all these years. The more you take that antenna and you put it up there, the more you get. And some of the stuff's powerful, John. Some of the stuff's powerful. Some of the stuff is inexplicable. I mean, I was in the Middle East, and I went to I was walking with I couldn't walk. I had a cane, and my knee was so bad. And this is part of the spiritual stuff that contributed to this. I needed to get a new knee, but we were in the Middle East. We were in Israel, and I went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And this day I crawled through a little tunnel. They allowed me, and there I am in Christ's tomb, where he was buried and where he's resurrected from. And I'm kind of doing my meditation, my spiritual stuff. Next day, the Church of the Annunciation in Nazareth, and I'm walking out, and suddenly I feel this tremendous pain up in my knee, and of course I have my cane, and all of a sudden I'm healed. No more cane, no more operation. Inexplicable things, but it's all part of my spiritual journey, the awareness, the coincidences, the things that it's so fascinating. And that's why I wrote this, to talk about this wonderful spiritual stuff, because I'm a New Jersey guy and I go to Rutgers football and basketball games. I keep saying I'm just a regular guy, and I've been gifted hauntingly. I mean, the stories I could. I'm a regular guy, but anyway, that's the spiritual stuff.
Okay. Well, I read the description of your book. You could have written a nonfiction book talking about you and your spiritual journey. You could have done that. You chose to do it in fictional form. That's my speed. That's the way I like to do things too. I find that much more effective. Is that why you did it?
Yes, it's funny. My son is a writer. My son won the highest award you can get from comic books. He won the Eisner Award a few summer. It was like my son won the Academy Award of comic books. He
Okay, cool.
he works for Scripps TV, and he was part of a team that put together this wonderful comic book 4 or 5 years ago to help support the children in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. I respect him so much. And as all this is unfolding, he said, "Dad, just do a bio, just do a memoir."
Mm.
And I said, "No, no." And I don't know, John, I don't know the psychology. Am I hiding behind? I don't know, but I was more comfortable. I was more comfortable making this fiction, and the character is fiction. Is it me? Well, I want to say, legally, no, it's not me, but there are elements of the character and the journey that's I pull from my own experiences to write. I guess we writers do that. I pulled from my own experiences, but it in early on in this process, there was that battle. Do I go memoir or do I do auto fiction? And back and forth and back and forth. Uh, but a year into this, I just proceeded down the course of fiction. I was just more comfortable. Maybe sometimes you don't want to. Maybe you're hiding behind the fiction thing.
Oh,
But I mean,
yeah, it's not the way I would put it. I find that testimony, anecdotal testimony, uh, can actually kind of be boring, and there's so much of it. Well, this is what happened to me, and it really moved me. And I've been on podcasts before explaining because they wanted to know why a 58-year-old became an atheist, and so I said, well, this is how it happened. And I realized as I'm telling the story, it's dead boring. Like, unless you end up in a cardboard box and someone's trying to shoot you, and like your parents have disowned you, and now you have to eat food, discarded food. Yeah, people will pay attention to that. And when I was in church and people gave testimony as to how they became a Christian, the heroin addict who turned into a born again Christian is always a better story than just, well, I grew up in a Christian home and I gave my heart to the Lord at age 7, and there you go. Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of dead boring. So if you're going to tell a story that is nonfiction, you better be someone famous. It better be a very dynamic story, or it's just not going to be interesting. But if you do it in fiction, and you can get very clever with that. So I stand behind what you're doing. Yeah, I don't think it's hiding. I think it's a very smart thing to do.
yeah, I was just so comfortable, and I wanted to create, in keeping with the character development. I just wanted to give the characters some depth and some what I call in here journey to precipices, of which the character does this, and the character came out of the same time period as we came out of, and we had a lot of things to deal with. The world is what the world is today. So my son, as I see him 2 3 times a week, invariably, once or twice a week, he'll bring up, "Why didn't you make it a memoir?" I said, "Because I wanted the freedom to develop this character and to be more inclusive, and to make it more interesting. I'm not interesting." So that's why I just opted for the auto fiction, and I'm just more comfortable with it because there are elements to the character that are not me. And it's funny because my wife out there in the kitchen is going to say, when our family reads it, she's going to get 50 phone calls. Is that Calvin? Did Calvin do those things? And even from my sister-in-law, who I love dearly, and she's just such a part of my life for 46 years. It's wonderful. She called me up last week. She said, "Calvin, did you do that?" I said, "No, no, it's not me. It's the character. It's Cameron Simmons who
Mhm.
but it's just a comfort level for me, John,
Okay.
to write pure fiction.
Cameron Simmons, that's your lead character, and I'm not going to read it here, but interesting character. He has visions or thoughts about what's in his head. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, early on, for Cameron, there's always, he can't explain it, but he calls it, early on in his life, even high school, college. There's something, he calls it something because he doesn't understand and he's too young to understand, but there's something in his life. It's a spiritual element. There's something that kind of moves him along. One of the best examples for Cameron and for me, there's a similarity here, is I started school. I'm a Rutgers guy, as everybody can see. But I started school in Ohio, in Toledo, Ohio, because that's where I wound up. I didn't get into Rutgers initially. And I spent 2 years out there. I almost made Dean's List. I exploded, and so did Cameron Simmons, and from being very reclusive and introverted and quiet. I was so involved. It was a wonderful 2 years for me. In so many ways, it was the wonderful 2 years for Cameron. And that summer of '65, and I had an apartment, I had a girlfriend. I mean, it was a perfect life for Cameron Simmons, also for me. And I came home that summer, and I was having dinner with my parents and my sister, and all of a sudden something comes over me. And this is, what, John, that's the mystery of our life, and having spiritual stuff, not religious stuff, but spiritual stuff. So we're having dinner, and something comes over me, and out of the randomness of the universe, I said to my parents, I said, "I think I'm going to transfer to Rutgers tomorrow." This was in the middle of the summer, 1965. And my mother spit out her coffee. And same thing for Cameron. And what do you mean? You're almost Dean's List. You're getting a scholarship. You're this. You're that. You have a girlfriend whose father owns a bowling alley. I mean, everything is perfect. Why are you leaving? Because for Cameron and for me, there was something that I couldn't define. There was just something there. You can't. You now, of course, sitting with having these years gone by, understanding better, there's a spiritual element. So there was something in my head that was kind of moving me. So I transferred, which was the most, why would I do that? To go from, but it's something which I could never, I mean, I can define now and understand. For Cameron, it was just something, and he would sit, often Cameron would sit, the cover is a jetty in Belmore, New Jersey, the Jersey Shore. That's a real picture I took, because when I was 10 years old, I had this affectation with sitting on jetties and staring out into the horizon and wondering about things. So at 10 years old, and I write about it for my character and me. We spent summers in Jersey Shore. So I would just sit on a jetty for hours a day because I was thinking about something. And so that's been a part of my life. And when it was time to come up with a cover, something came over me, and I said, I got to find that picture I took of me on the jetty, and I took a picture of my sneaker, and I said, that's got to be the cover. So it's something, we can't define it.
Yeah. Well, despite my way of thinking, my worldview, Um, Spirituality, I'm very soft on because we're still humans and we feel something. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I'm not for religion. Usually that causes problems. But spirituality, though I can't define it, I don't know if I ever will be able to. But I have a lot of respect for people who, like yourself, who use it and talk about it and have it direct their life. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Only good things come from that. That's what I've noticed. So hats off to you.
Correct. It's a gift, and it's not a gift that's it's a gift we all have.
Yes.
It's a gift we all have. It's how to again, it's the antenna theory, which I write about. I call it the antenna theory. You put that antenna up there, every one of us has it. Hey, you know, I owe a lot of my knowledge and some of my motivations to my mom. All my relatives' pictures are hanging over there, along with Babe Ruth. You know, Babe Ruth, Joe DiMaggio. So you know they're all there. But a great spiritual story. It was 4 or 5 years ago. I was just thinking of my mom. I mean, pictures right there, and what she taught me, and how she inculcated things into my. And I look at her, and listen, I sit in this chair 12 hours a day. I look at her picture there. She's smiling. It's 1941. She's with her brother. But one day, and it's just, I think this is, by the way, this story I'm telling you was the final catalyst for me to finish my novel. I got stuck in that place where I wasn't able to write for a few months. I was stuck, and I didn't even know if I was gonna finish this. I was stuck because I was stuck. It's you don't define writer's block, but I was stuck for months, and out of the clear blue, I decided to listen to a song that my mother loved. It was Mary Alonso sings "Only a Rose," and it's an opera thing. And don't ask me why, because it's buried deep into the recesses. But she listened to it constantly when I was growing up, constantly, and I began to love it. And from time to time, I would listen. You know, I'm a '60s guy. I listen to '60s music and folk music still to this day. But anyway, I found that. I found Mary Alonso and Only a Rose, and I listened to it because I'm a little OCD. I listened to it for 3 days. For 3 days. And until my wife started using the F word to tell me to stop listening because it's driving her crazy. And then I was texting. I was texting with a friend, a new friend we met on LinkedIn. He's wonderful, Gaetano. And he's involved in psychedelics and cannabis space, and he's just great. So we were texting back and forth. He asked me a question, and I wrote "Yup," Y-U-P, and I put my phone down and went about my business. And then 15 minutes later, you know, the reflex, you pick up your phone. And I picked up my phone just to have it in my hands, and I looked, and the outgoing message, which wasn't sent, was the word "mom" typed.
Wow.
I didn't type it. I don't have voice activation.
Yeah.
I've since asked about 50 super techie people, how did that get typed there? Nobody gave me an answer, but I know the answer. She got permission from whomever, whatever, to come out and just type "mom" to let me know. And that, John, was the jolt that
to cut you out of the writing block.
Correct. The writing block disappeared because you know, the goosebumps. That was such a jolt for me that was the final thing. In the next 6 months, I kind of banged out the rest of the novel. But it was from that inexplicable, and that's one of my favorite words that I use in here. Inexplicable. You know, these things. You know, these. Listen, another spiritual component to me, and I write about it here, and I give it to Cameron Simmons. But back in 1970, in the early 70s, I was in a terrible car accident. Terrible car accident. I was kind of drag racing. I had a Volkswagen, and we were drag racing. The road curved, and the guy hit me, and I swerved, and the car rolled over 6 times at 50 miles an hour. And I closed my eyes because I knew I was going to die. And when I finally opened up my eyes, the car was completely crushed. I'd landed on some lawn in suburban New Jersey, and there wasn't a scratch on me, not a scratch on me. And then it gets even more interesting. The police came and they asked what happened. And of course, I lied. I said some guy hit me, but the cop took me over. He said, your car went between a tree and a pole. And the physics is if you hit either the tree or the pole, you're completely crushed to death. There's nothing left of you. But the cop said it would appear that your car is wider than the distance between the tree and the pole. So we don't know how you got through.
Wow.
So we're talking about, and to this day, I drive by there whenever I'm floating around to look at it. And so that's inexplicable. So we just let it be.
Yeah.
Do I think somebody took over the steering of the car? Yeah, I do. Because, it's inexplicable. There's no explanations. It's spirit stuff.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
spirit stuff.
Good.
I do want to quickly mention when I was done doing this, I decided to take the path, because you're an editor. I decided to do this as I'm getting older. I wanted to do things the right way. I never had an editor before, but I decided to do the editing, not me, but to do it right. And a woman who's helping me, Karen, California, she recommended this wonderful editor, Alyssa, in Minneapolis. 3 months it took her to edit, but 15-year veteran of publishing and the whole bit. But so this was done the right way. And when it was done as a goof, because I didn't think I was Kirkus material. I just wrote, I wrote this as I wrote this, but I submitted it to Kirkus Reviews, the most prestigious book reviewer, been around almost 100 years. It was kind of a goof, and an expensive goof. It's not cheap to submit to Kirkus. And I submitted to Kirkus, and then in August, I got back completely out of body. They loved this novel.
Great.
And they gave me their highest honor, a Kirkus Star. And they compared me to John Irving, The World According to Garp.
Well,
I don't know where that comes from, but they compared me to John Irving. And giving me the star puts me in the same category as The Kite Runner, and The Help, because I'm up for Book of the Year. And I tell you, we have 2 meals a day, my wife and I, and each meal we look at each other and we laugh because it's out of body and it's surreal. Where did this come from?
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Vietnam War draft and how Cameron is nervous about that. Is that something you yourself also went through?
Yeah. Listen, we lived it. We came out of that tumultuous, terrible time. But I had recognized something about myself. I was a pacifist. I'd never hit anybody. I wouldn't know how to hit anybody. I wouldn't know how to punch someone. And so I was a pacifist, and the war was festering up. Fortunately, I was in school. My pharmacy education kept me in school for 6 years. So I had a student deferment. But every day I watched the news of the war, and I watched Walter Cronkite. I was so possessed for years and years and years when I'm going to have to confront the draft and maybe wind up in Southeast Asia. You had to live those times. You had to be in those times. The draft was ripping apart a country, polarizing and dissecting a country. Um, I was possessed, and I did. I'm in preparing as my time was nearing when I'd have to go for a physical and get inducted. 6, 7, 8 months beforehand. We lived it, and it was such a powerful. And I didn't know. I knew I couldn't pick up a gun and shoot a human being. I can't do that. I have a hard. Listen. I don't. Part of my journey is I'm a humanitarian. I stopped eating anything with 4 legs in 1975. I've never mentioned that to you. I haven't eaten anything with 4 legs since 1975. And part of that is being humanitarian. These are creatures that have eyes and a heart and a brain. I can't do that. Actually, it turned out to be great, because I have 0 coronary artery plaque, because I haven't done that stuff ostensibly.
Yeah.
And which means the blood flowing to my 78-year-old head is unimpeded, and it allows me to think clearly for being a septuagenarian. So with those kind of things in my heart, in my soul, fighting a war and going to war is just a hard. And I love my country, and I love peace, and I love all these things. But it was a totally consumptive time. Actually, the back cover of my novel is, I drew this in 1970 as I was facing induction into the army. I drew this as a self-portrait, as my protestation. So during this whole period of what am I going to do, and Cameron Simmons also does something similar. I decided I'm going to hit every deli and bakery in the state of New Jersey, and that wonderful time, and it's kind of wonderful. I gained 100 pounds quickly. Oh, it was great, John. It was. I mean,
that was your plan to not be
overweight. My plan was I'm going to become overweight, and I did this unscientifically and without any knowledge and what's the right thing to do. I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. 7-layer cakes and crumb cake and sub sandwiches.
I've never heard that strategy. That's a new one.
It was a new one. It wasn't forced in a lot of intelligence, because I gained 100 pounds.
Yeah.
And my first wife at the time, very supportive of me, was a tiny little girl. And I gained 100 pounds. And then somebody in authority came over to me and said, Calvin, you gained 100 pounds. You think you're going to get out of the army, but that's a bad strategy, because if you go in there and you present yourself overweight, they're going to give you 6 months to lose it. Whether you lose it or not, they're taking you. So it was a bad, stupid. It was a lot of fun, but it wouldn't have kept me out. So as I mentioned to you before we went on air, John, I was down to a couple of decisions. What am I going to do when my time? How am I going to? So there were, for me, as a pacifist, and I even had a draft lawyer at the time, and I thought I could become a conscientious objector.
Yeah, there's always that.
Yep. But it's funny, Muhammad Ali was trying to do the same thing. And on religious grounds, conscientious objector, and I think his case wound up in the Supreme Court. I didn't have the resources for that, and I certainly didn't have enough background to support that. Just deep in my heart, I knew war's a trouble thing. It's better to talk. So my first wife, was very supportive. She said, "Whatever my 2 choices were to come up to your country, Canada." to come
Yeah.
to Canada. Probably have
I've
to,
met a few. I've met a few people like that. Yeah.
yeah, and or go to prison and serve my 2 years or 3 years, whatever it is, and serve my country by going to prison. So those were my two choices. And I've had guilt. I've had guilt for a lot of years, and to this day, I still battle with the guilt that I didn't serve in the army. And my wife keeps yelling at me, "But you're here." Um, but I did find a piece from Shakespeare. He talks about the band of brothers and the camaraderie and all that, but it made me feel better. It made me feel better. But Vietnam is a chunk of this. It's a part of the whole character. It's a part of the character's journey. It's a part of his mindset. It's a part of what preoccupies him. It's a part of his guilt, and he's laden with that word guilt.
Yeah. Well, my understanding is the conscription ended in 73 for another 2 years before the war officially ended. How close were you to that date when you were still worried about it? What year was it that you had to be concerned about?
It was 1970. It was 1970. This was the summer of 70. I had to come to terms. I had to come to terms with what am I going to do in September, October 1970.
That was right after the Tet Offensive, so things were really heated up by that point.
Heated up,
Yeah.
and it really heated up, and they always talked about reducing troop strength and letting the South Vietnamese take more of the. I in my own way. I was never sure of the motivations of the war. I'm not politicizing anything, and I was so certain. And one of the things that led me down my path and the character's path is I was so certain that part of the elements of this war was to save face. America doesn't want to lose. Didn't want to lose a war.
Yeah, it's a very complicated story. Yeah,
very complicated, very complicated, and I'm not oversimplifying it. Although Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense at that time, wrote a secret paper that he hid away, and it was recently, a few years ago, it was recently uncovered, that he said that we're not going to be able to win this war because we're not going to be able to win this war. And the other thing I said as a young 25-year-old, the thing I said in my own way, and I wasn't that, I was just a kid, and kind of was that the sad thing about this war and all the death on both sides and the pain and the things we can't even imagine is 6 months when it's over. McDonald's and Coke and Pepsi are going to be there selling hamburgers and soda, despite all those precious lives lost. And that's basically what happened. And I sit back today and I watch that Vietnam is a honeymoon destination.
I hear it's very nice to go there. Yeah.
Yes, beautiful country, beautiful people. Beautiful country, beautiful people. And all the lives on both sides, lost. So I've kind of come to terms. So did Cameron Simmons.
So does Cameron Simmons. That's good.
So does Cameron Simmons.
So your book has a happy ending then?
Yeah. Yes. It's funny. I had an ending in my mind the whole time, we writers, and so I wrote. It's a great side story. So I wrote the ending that I felt I was comfortable with. It kind of identified with Cameron Simmons, and my first editing is I found a content editor, and I submitted it to her. This was a year even before I did Kirk, I did the real editing in Kirkus. And so she took my manuscript, she read it for a few months, she got back to me. She said, "I love the first third of your book." I said, "Great." Just I wouldn't change it. She said the middle third I had an issue with, and there was some character development which she had an issue with, and I'll leave it at that. And she had the last third of the book, leading up to the ending, she had a real problem with. She didn't like the ending, and it kind of surprised her. And I said, "Well, it shouldn't. I telegraphed the ending to you. I telegraphed the ending to you and everybody. It took me a whole third of the novel to telegraph an ending." And she said, I don't like it. It bothers me." So I sat and I thought about it, and she's the content editor, not me. And the advice she gave me, the middle third, I went in and did some. It was a 3-hour fix, not a 3-week fix or a 3-month fix.
Mhm.
The middle third, I went in and I fixed certain relationships with the character. Boom, and then something came to me. That word, something, John.
Oh yeah, that word. Yeah.
Something came to me, and I kind of realized, well, maybe she's right. And all I did was change the last sentence in the novel, and it changed the whole flavor of the novel. In answering your question, it changed the whole flavor of the novel, and I was so happy with it. And interestingly, the editor who I used, it took her 3 months to do it, but she did write me. She said that last sentence in the novel is one of the best last sentences she's ever read. So I was deeply honored.
Wow.
So in answer to your question, I guess it's under the realm of happy.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. You change one sentence and that changes things. I've noticed that in life too. It could be like that. You
Yeah,
just change a little thing, you get back on course again.
exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. That's all you need. Just one little thing.
Mhm.
And it changed the whole, the whole flavor around.
Yeah. This was published October 12th, 2023. We're in November or mid-November. It's been out for about a month, maybe
Yes.
slightly longer.
Yes.
How is it being received?
Well, my immediate world received well, and the people who've read it really liked it. And I don't twist anybody's arm. I really want honesty and stuff. But there's a funny thing I've learned, and I'm learning, and I'm a social media guy, and I have a pod. The thing I've learned, well, I'm an indie author, and proud of it, and I'm a self-published guy, and it's just me. There's no Simon & Schuster, and there's no Penguin, and there's no agent, and there's no nothing. And there's me, and this is not my forte. And I'm walking around with a Kirkus star, and I'd love to shout it from the top of a hill. There's a lot of work to get it out there, and I know that when people read it, they'll love it, and certainly people of our septuagenarian and sexagenarian. I know that little niche will like it because it's a great memory thing, but it's also contemporary. So in the world, in my immediate world, received really beyond what I would have. Even my the old vice president of the company where I worked, and here's a guy who's on another planet, brilliant, and the architect of so many different sales policies and procedures and creativities, and I mean, guy's a genius. He read it and he absolutely loved it, and wrote me a great review that he won't let me publish, but whatever. But the point being, in my small microcosmic world, it's been received beyond what I would have imagined.
Good.
and genuinely. But I'm spending some time with you now to spread the word around. It's a great read. It's fascinating. It's got a lot of different elements to it, but I've got to find ways to kind of get it out there.
Yeah.
It's daunting. Sometimes I feel like an ant, about the ant, a little ant ready to climb Mount Everest. That's a hell of a climb.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that ant.
You mentioned the word indie. I haven't heard that word in a while. I was an indie musician. I turned into an indie musician in the 80s. Now, I didn't start out that way. I did demo tapes in the late 70s into up to 82. And I had a manager, and we went and tried to get a record contract because that was the thing to do. And of course, I got rejected. Finally, after 82, I said, no, I'm just going to do this myself. I'll pay for studio time. I'll pay for the record pressing. I made my own vinyl. Everything costs a lot of money. And I kept books. I wanted to know how much money is going out and how much money then is coming in. And by 1990, when I finally retired from music, I basically came to the conclusion that I broke even. But I had a great time breaking even. So I did make my money back, but I wasn't able to make a living. You obviously spent money on editors, graphic designers. Money has been coming out of your wallet just to do this book. Are you going to be satisfied if what you do is you break even?
Uh, uh, I would jump higher than I've ever jumped if I could break even. It's a great question. It's not. I don't know what I don't even know what it is. The drive to do this, the pushing, and now to keep pushing and to get out there. It's because I think people can get a kick out of it, and maybe if I can read, there's an old saying. I don't know where it's. Somebody would tell me it came from the Quran, and I'm not sure. But there's an old saying: "He or she who saves a life saves the world." And so if I can make somebody feel good with this, hey, that's great. And alerting people that maybe there's something beyond. Or so I think this has got a I think this is I think this is a movie. It may be the modern day coming of Forrest Gump. I don't know. So I'm doing this because I'm doing this, and
You felt led to do it. You felt led to do it.
yeah, I felt led to do this, compelled to do this. I've been given every, and when you read the elements of what happens to Cameron, the spiritual stuff. I mean, you can't make some of this stuff up. You can't. It's beyond fiction. It's wonderful. It's a gift, and we all have it. So, do I ever think? I don't really think about breaking even. I just, and by the way, interesting. In here, there's a character briefly introduced who's one of my dearest friends in real life. He's one of the great supporters of indie music here in New Jersey. His name's Danny Coleman, and that's been his life and his passion. He's got a radio show, Rock on Radio. He's been doing it for soon to be 15 years, but it's only supporting independent musicians, and we have it's a great friendship. And then some years ago, he said, "Hey, you want to co-host with me?" So I co-hosted with him for a year and a half, and every week he'd have another indie artist, band, whatever, on his 2-3 hour radio show, and it was one of the most satisfying things that I've ever done. And I kept telling Danny every week, "Danny, I don't know anything about music." He said, "But you're going to research everything, Calvin, and you research and you'll learn." But it was one of and we're still great friends. It was one of my great undertakings to be exposed to that world, this precious world of independent musicians and their journeys. And I did that every week for a year and a half. It was great. And so when you talked about, you being indie, that's kind of bonding for us, John.
Yeah. Well, you remember the 90s, 30 some odd years ago, or 3 decades, we'll say. A lot of self-help books came out. It got quite bothersome, and I've interviewed a lot of authors like yourself. I know you do that on your podcast. And once in a while, I come across an author who has written a book similar to yours. I mean, very different story, obviously, but the spirit of it is there. And there's very few people who write that way. I'm beginning to redefine what a true self-help book is. And I wouldn't degrade your book to be that self-help of the 90s, which is quite obnoxious, telling people how to live and what to do. Would you say that you fall into that category where when people read your book and good things happen to them, they start thinking, wow, I never thought about that. And they apply some of that to their own life, and their life gets richer and better for it.
Yeah,
In that sense, it's a self-help book.
a great observation, and I never thought of it this way, but it's fabulous. It really is. What yeah, I never thought of it, but the answer is yes. This is self-help, and my journey, and like I said, I've said this a few times, we all have it. We're all gifted with the antenna. It's just
Yeah.
if you use it or not. We're gifted with the antenna to reach out, and that's what it is. To reach out to things that are beyond, our comprehension. My whole journey began one night. I just got up at 2, 3 in the morning, and I couldn't sleep, so I came down here and I just sat and I stared at the computer screen. And this is an element of self-help. And I didn't know what to do, and suddenly it came to me that I wanted to listen to the Bee Gees song Lamplight. Now, I hadn't heard the song in 30, 40 years, but I had to listen to it. And I found it, I listened to it, and then I got up. It was 4:30 in the morning. I have to get up in a couple of hours to go to work, sell eyeglasses, and I started to go, but something pulled me back, and I go with the something. When there's a something in your life, you go with it. And I came back here, and I typed my mother's maiden name, and a bunch of things came up, and then there was something that came up about this pharmacy where I worked as a kid, and it was my mother's brother, and it was so. Anyway, I went to the site and I stumbled upon it, and there was an article written on this site, and it was so random, and it was written by this guy whom ostensibly I worked with in the late 50s in this drugstore. Again, this is self-help. So I looked at the time, and it was 4:44 in the morning, and I wrote him. His name's Bill. And in the book he's Bill Tyler, and I wrote him at 4:44 in the morning, and I said, "Dear Bill, and it's 4:44 in the morning, and I'm writing you. I want to ask if you the guy I worked with in the 50s." And I went to bed, and the following morning, I looked, and he had written me, and he said, "Yeah, Cal, it's me.
Mm-hmm.
It's me. You just found me in the most random, strange way." He was an interesting guy. He's been to the Taj Mahal. He's climbed part of Mount Everest. Just really interesting guy. But the point being, he then, as we now got reunited, and he wrote me that when I wrote him, I had the wherewithal. It was totally a useless thing to do, to look at the time, because every email you send has the time.
Yeah.
I looked at the time, it was 4:44. So he wrote me back, and he said, "Calvin, you haunt me and you intrigue me. I wasn't surprised when you wrote me at 4:44 in the morning. I have to tell you that 4:44 is a major portion of my life. I get up every morning, it's 4:44. I go to the Rotary Club, I draw a number, it's 444. I look at a license plate, 444.
Hmm.
I've since gone to my priest, and my priest has told me that 444 is a sign of angelic intervention.
Wow.
So the self-help this was transformative in my life.
Yeah.
The self-help. And I cannot tell you how many people, John, I've interacted with over the years, to tell them that, hey, go check it out. 444, 111. These are numbers that come from, the universe.
Yeah.
And as I've learned to discover, it's ways for my grandfather to let me know he's in the room with me. I'll suddenly notice I'm on the exercise bike, I'm pedaling, and I'll just stop and look at the readout, and it's 444 calories, or it's 111.
Yeah.
But it's such a part of my life. But it's self-help. The
Yeah.
self-help aspect is this has taught me to be aware, to be conscious, and if more people can stop, doing this with a cell phone, and stop looking at TikTok for a few minutes, and be aware of the world around them, maybe you can find things out. That's the self-help element.
Okay. Excellent. Your podcast. You interview authors. I was one of them. How's that going for you?
I've done about I think 260, and that was kind of a goof. It was in the middle of the pandemic. I have almost 4,500 subscribers, done 260 interviews. I love doing that, and I've settled in on authors because I have this kinship with authors. But I do Gen Z, do a lot of climate stuff. We didn't talk about that, but that's a big element to my life right now, is climate change. And formed a little global group, and we get together. Just had a thing on my channel where I interviewed a half a dozen people. One guy was in Borneo.
Okay.
Borneo. So in the jungles of Borneo, 12 hours on the other side of the world, we were talking about climate change. And another very good friend of mine from the channel, Alan Hesse, he's in Quito.
Oh.
And so it's wonderful. I love it. But hey, you get up every day, and I know a TikTok gets a 400-pound person dancing, and that gets 500,000 views.
Crazy, I know.
Yeah, and you and I, and others put out such wonderful content, such interesting, diverse, amazing people, accomplish, and so it doesn't get what I'd like to say, what it should get. And every morning for 10-15 minutes, I stare at the screen, and I'll say, what the hell am I doing? And then I go back to work doing it. And I love it because we give a platform. We really do a wonderful service, because everybody that I interview is not going to get, generally speaking, is not going to get interviewed by Oprah.
Yeah.
It's not going to wind up on the Today Show or on CNN. So it's a wonderful platform of awareness and recognition. And that is part of the energy that feeds me. We're doing a service.
Yeah.
And
That's what drove me to do this. I wanted to reach out and help other people. Stop thinking about how can I sell books? Well, how about I help others sell theirs? And you never know where that goes from there.
Right.
Just stop thinking about yourself long enough to care about others.
Correct.
Yeah. I guess I am spiritual.
Yep. And that is it's a wonderful undertaking, and it's a spiritual thing. You're giving back, you're giving back to help people. So that it works for me.
Yeah.
It works for me. And sometimes I listen, I don't get celebrities. It's funny, I invited Lin-Manuel Miranda, one of the hottest entertainers on earth. He did Hamilton, and he's and it was a goof. one day I saw online his address in New York. And I said, oh, what the hell, you know, and I typed up a nice note, and I mailed a lovely note to Lin-Manuel Miranda to come on Conversations with Calvin. And of course I didn't hear anything right away, but you know, a couple months later I got a thing in the mail, and it was addressed to me, and opened it up, and it was a handwritten note from Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Cool.
Thanking me for inviting him. He said he's very busy. I know he's very busy.
Mm-hmm.
He's pulled in 85 million different directions, but it was really nice. And by the way, one of the most gratifying, really gratifying. So we, you know, do a wonderful service.
Yeah.
And
Well, you know, I had one celebrity, and I did the same thing, and I still do it. I think of someone who's, you know, semi-famous or, you know, well known, and I know they've written a book, and so I communicate. I send an email to them, and only one person ever got back to me, and then agreed to be on the show. Now, if you look at all my videos on to tell me about your book, you'll see that that one person's video has now into thousands of views just because of who that person is.
yes, yes.
And I didn't do it, you know, just for that reason. I actually wanted to really speak to him because I admire his work. I've admired his work ever since the early 80s. And I've contacted other people like Miles Goodwin from April Wine. He wrote a book. I like that April Wine. Hasn't got back to me. Derek Schulman of Gentle Giant. I want him on my show. He wrote a book. Hasn't got back to me yet. But I'm going to keep trying doing that just because, I don't know, I find those people interesting and I personally admire them. I don't want just anybody who's famous. I want
Right.
people who are famous that I personally admire.
Right.
Not so easy though.
No, it's not.
They're very busy people.
It's not easy. I've written, you know, every once in a while I get that inspiration. I wrote Howard Stern.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Why not? I'm a really good letter writer. I've written Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
I've written him lovely notes. I know most of these things never get to them because they get intercepted.
Yeah, exactly. But you may as well. Well,
but I do it, and I debate: should I go out and buy a Mega Millions lottery ticket, or should I write a letter to Howard Stern?
Yeah.
So one particular day, I'll write a letter to Howard Stern. You know, both the odds of anything happening for both the Mega Millions, which is 1 in 300 million, and maybe writing Howard Stern is 1 in 300 million. But I do it.
Yeah, I just have one more question about being podcasters, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Sure.
Have you ever had to turn someone down for any reason?
Yeah, I don't do politics, and I don't do religion, ever, because what I've learned being a septuagenarian is you can never win. You can never win. I want to be liked. So there have been a few people who have been running for office who contacted me, and maybe once removed, they know somebody who I know, and they're running for office. And you know, I try to be very delicate, and this won't work because I don't. We could talk about anything, but we can't talk about politics because you can't win. So yes, I've turned down a couple of political people who are running for office.
Okay. That hasn't happened to me. My criteria is no hate and no misinformation. I had one guest on who misrepresented themselves. And I won't tell you the subject matter, but while I'm interviewing this person, it's getting ugly. And I went through the whole thing, and we finished the interview, and I thought about it. I even edited it. I kept it in for my personal record. I can't air anything like that where the person actually has a hate for a certain segment of our society. Nope, that's not going to happen on my show.
Agreed.
There's plenty of that already.
There's enough. There's plenty of it out there. I don't do that either. I just, you know, I only focus on positivity, and just positive aspects. I don't I did actually, I draw strict lines, but I did interview this wonderful woman, who goes to the Ukraine, to interview people,
Hmm.
mothers and children.
Yeah.
Every few months she's in the Ukraine, but that's not politics. It's human.
And it could be
You
sad. It could be sad. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, uh, and there are some sad journeys, and looking back on, there's some people have had some really hard times and hard journeys, and that's fine. And I'm content. And it's funny, my entire adult life, I've stayed away. When I was doing my journalism here in New Jersey, I had a cable TV talk show. I mean, all that. I've stayed so far away from politics and religion. And when I wake up in the morning, I realize that a lot of people like me
Hmm.
because I don't touch those things,
Yeah.
and there's no reason for any kind of confrontation or reason to disagree. I
Yeah.
just focus. I accentuate the positive. I think that was an old song from the 40s.
Is it 40s? Oh,
Something like
okay.
that.
I do know. I knew that lyric. It's a good song, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
great song. I think it was the 40s, 50s.
Could
Accentuate
be.
the positive. Sounds like it came out of the 40s.
Sure. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we've been talking for quite a while, Cal, and
this is
perhaps we should
great.
just wrap it up. I really
Okay.
enjoyed this conversation.
Me
You're a
too.
fascinating gentleman.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And you too. And I'm so glad that, I had a chance to interview you, and, we're kind of brothers.
Yeah.
We are, in our journeys.
Yeah.
Lots of, so in the words of, an old Clint Eastwood movie, you made my day, John.
Hmm. I think I know that one.
Yeah. Yep. Dirty Harry.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, Cal. Well, you take care of yourself, and I wish you all the success with your new book.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. Thank you. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you for watching. And before you go, if you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and don't forget to ring that bell for future notifications. You can even leave a comment. All of that really helps in recommending this channel to a larger audience. And if you are an author, I would love to speak with you about your book. Until next time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.